Welcome to the Ben Wood Johnson podcast. You can visit Dr. Johnson's blog at benwoodpost.com. Dr. Johnson's works can be found at drbenwoodjohnson.com. You can also support Dr. Johnson on Patreon, the link to which is in the description. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome to the Ben Wood Johnson podcast. Today is November 1st, 2021. This is podcast number 70. Now, it has been a while since I've posted a podcast, an episode. I apologize to all of my subscribers, and I apologize. I have been pressed for time and I have not had the opportunity to record a podcast. But anyway, I'm back and we're going to continue our conversation about the notion of crime. And remember, when we're talking about crime, we're talking about it from a philosophical standpoint. Crime could be understood from different angles, from different prisms. I'm talking about crime purely from a philosophical standpoint. Anyway, today the conversation is going to be driven by the concept of theories in crime. To understand crime, you have to understand the rationale behind the concept. The best way to understand the rationale behind crime is to understand the theories of crime. So in these series of podcasts, I'm going to be talking about some of the the fundamental theories, the most basic ones, of course, about what crime is, who are criminals and whatnot. So without further ado, let us delve right into it. When we are defining crime, when we are trying to understand what crime is, the fundamental thing to understand is that crime is a wrong so prohibited and so perpetrated by a third person. In other words, as long as or so long as a particular conduct is prohibited, there is a law that defines that conduct. And an individual engages in such a conduct, that conduct is said to be a crime. And the individual who engages in such a conduct is said to be a criminal. But epistemologically speaking, what is a crime? How did we come up with this concept? Where did it come from? And what is the rationale for it? When we're talking about crime, when we are talking about being a criminal in society, what does it mean? Now, in previous podcasts, we talked about the concept of, people being immoral, people being evil by nature, people being wrong, they're violent in their core, they're bad, they're mischievous, and so on. So these people are criminal because they are likely to behave a certain way. Of course, there are different explanations as to why people do things. Of course, we have come to accept the understanding that certain groups of people in society are criminal. For example, people that are depraved, that are financially depraved, morally depraved, or individually depraved, if you will. These people are likely to become criminal. Or people that have a particular skin color. The person happens to be black or Latino, well, the presumption is that, he is likely to be a criminal. And the explanation for that is that, that's because he's black, or that's because he's poor, or that's because his father was not in the home, or that's because his mother was dealing drugs, or that's because he didn't have a family support, he didn't get an education. So when we try to come up with all sorts of explanations as to why people engage in criminal conduct, but as I just said, the fundamental understanding of what a crime is is the concept that it is so defined. In other words, the conduct itself has to be defined as such. Okay? If a conduct is not defined as criminal or as a crime, any person who engages in a similar conduct, we couldn't say that this person is criminal. Okay? And we've talked about the concept of crime in terms of killing, right? So in certain environments or under certain circumstances, killing is not a crime. It's not a wrong. In fact, there are environments, there are circumstances where killing is validated, is encouraged. And there are society where people are proud of their killers. You know, for example, if you are a military, you are a killer. If you are a military, you are a killer. You're trained to kill. Now, of course, we could debate why you are trained to kill, but the fact remains that you are trained to kill. Your job is to kill. That is your job. You're a killer. Yet, in that context, your killing is not considered killing. Or at least it's not considered a wrong. Okay? So there are instances where people engage in conduct that are deemed a particular way in a particular context, but the same conduct is deemed differently in a different context. But the rationale, what we usually use in society to define a conduct, is usually based on assumptions that we as a society have about why people are a certain way or why they're not. And those assumptions are usually derived from our understanding of ourselves and our understanding of others in terms of who they are, in terms of who we are, or who we should be, or who they should be. Those rationale usually come from the concept known as a theory. In other words, we theorize why people are a certain way and the likelihood that they would be a certain way. And out of those theories, we try to come up with scientific explanation. At least we sort of convince ourselves that we try to make it logical, right? So we conduct experiment to confirm that what we think things are is exactly what things are. So in this case, we say, okay, scientifically speaking, we can say with this amount of certainty that what we thought of this or that instance or person, whatever, is actually true because we can prove it scientifically. And whenever we're talking about scientific, we're talking about being able to replicate, being able to do it in other circumstances and come to the same result. Okay? So the foundation of our understanding of crime is what I would call a crime theory. Then the question becomes, what is a theory in terms of epistemologically? A theory could be described as an explanation, or perhaps a part of an explanation. A theory is an attempt to explain a conduct, a phenomenon, a behavior, an event, perhaps something that is happening right now, something that happened in the past. So we try to come up with a way of explaining it. So a theory, by that definition, is an explanation, or it is a part of an explanation. Okay? What we call a grand theory. It's a theory that seeks to explain everything. Okay? But in general term, a theory is a part of an explanation. And what the theory is trying to do is explaining why or how things happened, a conduct occurred. So, by that understanding, the fundamentals of a theory are three things. The first facet of a theory is what I would call a belief. If you believe that people do this or people do that for whatever the reason, then you might try to explain the reason people do this or do that based on that belief. If you believe that a person's skin color is the root cause of the reason that individual behaved this way or that way. Let's say this person is a criminal or this person is a killer. And if you believe that being black, for example, could explain why people are criminal, the fact that you are black, that explains the reason you are a criminal. If that is your belief, then any theory you're going to come up with is going to be based on that belief. So a belief could sort of guide a theory. Okay? If you believe that something is a certain way or could be a certain way, then that belief could lead to a theory. So an important facet of a theory is a belief. Another important element of a theory is attitude, or a demeanor towards X, Y, and Z. An attitude is generally understood as a comportment, a way of being around X or Y situation or Y person. An attitude is a way of conducting oneself, and it is visible to the extent that it can be sort of seen to be there. Okay? If you have a negative attitude towards people that are black, and you think that these individuals are criminal, and because of that thinking or because of that belief, you are likely to refrain from engaging with black people, then that restriction you sort of impose onto yourself becomes an attitude. You have an attitude towards people of color. When you see a person of color, you make assumptions that are based on your beliefs usually, and it drives your behavior towards that individual. So that could guide your theory about the reason such a person would engage in crime. The third element of a theory is information. Information could be understood as knowledge that you receive, you obtain, you acquired, you got, you gained over the years, over time, during your lifetime about a particular entity or a particular group of people. If you believe or if you have been told your whole life that people of a certain racial category or racial complexion are likely to be criminal, and you've been told this over and over again, it becomes ingrained in your psyche where you believe that people of that particular complexion are likely to be criminal. And it changes your attitude towards these individuals because you've been told they're bad, you believe they're bad, and when you see them, you act in a way to protect yourself perhaps, or to defend yourself perhaps against these individuals that you perceive as being bad. So your understanding of these individuals could be based on the information you received. Okay? So that is why on the outset, three important elements could explain a theory: your belief, your attitudes, and the information you receive. They're not necessarily mutually inclusive. One does not necessarily rely on the other. Okay? You may not believe that black people are criminal, but you've been told that they are your whole life. You may believe that black people are criminal, but you've been told differently your whole life. Or you may be nice towards people of color or people you perceive to be criminal. You may be nice to them, but deep inside you're afraid of them. You think they're a criminal. You think they could do wrong to you. So those three elements guide your understanding of crime. Okay? So when we're talking about crime, at least a crime theory, those three elements are important to understand.